Hey there, it's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me. So is Kyle Boone, Strong Jaw. If you're watching on YouTube, you know what to do to that like button. Shouts to Brandon Davies. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel. It would be awesome if you did that while you're here. Let's get into it. We are now just, I guess it's 2 days away from the 2025 NBA draft. So like any self-respecting basketball podcast, we're going to conduct the first round mock alternating picks. Norlander's going to pick first, then Strongjaw, then me. Do either one of you have anything to add before we get started? Or Norlander, are you ready to take Cooper Flagg number 1 overall?
Wait a second. I've got number 1?
I think so.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, these guys have done a combined like 4 mock drafts in the past 36 hours or something like that. They're absolutely roaring and ready. I'm fresh. I had no mock draft television responsibilities today. So I'm coming to this eager, raring to go. CP, are you raring?
I don't know if raring would be the right word, but no. I am eager.
We're going to have fun. Can we get this done in less than 90 minutes, by the way?
Oh, God, we better.
Let's just I
got a pack.
Let's just let Norlander do solo pod here.
Yeah, well, good. We'll see on that. By the way, Juice got a pack. He's going to be in studio Wednesday night. Mock draft, real draft on CBS Sports HQ. That will be live on YouTube. KBA will be involved in our coverage as well on Thursday, and it's a pleasure. I had Finkelstein on the draft mailbag episode last week. That was a lot of fun as well. If you've not listened to that, please go dive into that. We got in some different angles, so we wanted to give you a variety of different thoughts. So, yeah, let's go. Let's rock. I'm psyched.
Pick.
Okay, with the first pick in the 2025, are we doing this thing for every pick, by the way?
I don't think we have to pretend to be Adam Silver.
Yeah.
I don't believe we have to pretend to be Adam Silver. Although, look.
You're getting there. Yeah, this whole thing again. Yeah.
I need to drop about 20 more.
Yeah,
like 20 more.
Grow a good 6 inches, and you're good
I need to grow 6 inches. You know what? I might not need to lose 20 more if I just grow 6 inches. Damn, I haven't ever thought about that.
You're good to go. If you can pull that off, you're absolutely good to go. I'm going first. Boone is second, Parrish is third. All right, Cooper Flagg to the Mavericks. We've talked about him plenty on this pod, obviously. Let me just toss this back to you guys on this. 15 years from now, Cooper Flagg, where is his career going to wind up? Is he going to be a Hall of Fame level player? Will he be just short of that? Will he be a pretty good player? Will he be a Jag? Boone, I'm going to you first. We know why he is the number 1 prospect in this class, but let's have a little reckless speculation and future forecasting. When we are, approaching the year 2040, will Cooper Flagg have validated all of this hype? Because where he is right now, if he hits it, he's a Hall of Fame player. Is that what he's going to be?
Yeah, so peek behind the curtain is I do a grading system for every prospect in this year's draft class every single year. I rank and grade 100 players. Cooper Flagg obviously got the highest grade in this class, and he is the only prospect in this year's class who got a grade between 95 and 100, which is like exclusive rare air. Only, like Victor Wembanyama got that several years ago. He got that as well, which is a projected future Hall of Famer. Now, saying that out loud seems insane. He's a teenager. That is high expectations, even given the fact that he is a prodigious talent. But I think if all goes right, he could end up being a future Hall of Famer just because he is so good, so sound at so many different things. He is a defensive game changer. He led Duke in scoring and assists and blocks and steals and everything else. And Duke went to the Final Four and they won 35 games. There's not a lot of holes in Cooper Flagg's game. So, it feels weird to project and predict that he will be a future Hall of Famer, but based on my grading system, based off of the scouting that I've done on him, I think there's a real chance that could end up being in his future.
Yeah, I don't think it's weird to go there. Like we would have went there with Anthony Davis coming out of college. We would have went there with Greg Oden coming out of college. We would have went there with probably Kevin Durant coming out of college. Obviously, the Greg Oden thing is a great example because you never know. Injuries can derail anybody's career. But I put it this way. If Cooper Flagg doesn't have serious injury issues throughout his career, he will be a Hall of Fame basketball player. Something short of an MVP, but something worthy of Hall of Fame credentials by the time he calls it a career. Yes, I would predict that.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Over under 0.5 MVPs in his career, you'll take the under.
I would take the under. I just think like Victor Wembanyama is going to exist for a long time.
Yeah.
You've got Debanza coming in behind him. I just think like that's such a hard thing. But keep in mind, I could be wrong. I promise you go back to whatever draft Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was coming out of. I would have never told you I thought he was going to be an MVP, and he's an MVP and a scoring champ and a world champ and the whole deal. So I leave open the possibility for anything, but I would go under 0.5 MVPs, but Hall of Fame career.
Yeah, we've nearly run out of things to say and certainly write about Flag because I remember going back to the Nike circuit a few years back, and just even at that point, as he's 14 into 15 years old, and there's this kid from Maine. You're not accustomed in that environment to even seeing a team and at the Peach Jam with just Maine across the chat. Like, he has been building towards something here, deservedly so, clearly on his own tier. I think he can hit Scottie Pippen type levels at his ceiling. I think for his skill set can actually match a lot of what Pippen did with the Bulls overall. He does so many things so well. His floor is by far the highest of any in this class, and his ceiling is the highest as well of anyone in the class there. So intrigued to see what he can do in Dallas, and that is fait accompli. We'll obviously offer up a few more thoughts on him. Parrish and I will be doing a round one reaction pod on Wednesday night. KB, you were up next, number 2 with San Antonio.
Going to do the expected here. Going to select Dylan Harper from Rutgers for the Spurs. This seems like it is going to happen, just like it seems Cooper Flagg will be a Dallas Maverick. And, I won't take the air out of it too much, but, this is someone who his dad played at the NBA level, Ron Harper. He's got a great pedigree, former 5-star recruit. Harper's smooth lefty. He can create for himself on offense. He can create for teammates. I think what you probably hope for in a modern NBA guard, which is, for him, I think it's kind of like a jumbo Jalen Brunson would be kind of in his range of outcomes, which, if you're getting a bigger version of Jalen Brunson at number 2, seems like a pretty good deal for the Spurs.
There may be a mock draft out there somewhere that doesn't have Cooper Flagg and Dylan Harper going 1 and 2, but I don't think my eyeballs have seen it. So barring a surprise, something that would surprise all of us, that is the way the draft's going to start. And then we get to 3 with Philadelphia, and there are big questions here. KB, before we discuss what I would do with this pick, just update us on the Ace Bailey situation. He famously canceled a visit in Philadelphia. I saw a report that suggested he might try to get there actually before the draft, but who knows? Just update us on Ace Bailey's unusual pre-draft process.
Yeah, it's been interesting. So his agent is actually Sharif Cooper's dad, Omar Cooper. Doesn't have a lot of high-profile clients. Very, I think, fresh in the agency space, and so his handling of the pre-draft process has, I think, been interesting and a little bit scrutinized. So last week had a pre-draft private workout meeting and a workout with the 76ers, who obviously hold the number 3 pick. Canceled that on Wednesday, just a couple days before that was scheduled to happen. And before that, I think most people expected Bailey would be the number 3 pick, or a lot of people expected that Bailey would very much be in the mix to be the number 3 pick. And now, I think there's a lot of noise surrounding that situation where, is he trying to steer to Washington at number 6, where he can go and potentially be the number 1 option, or, even the Utah Jazz at number 5 would make some sense. It's a very interesting, fluid situation. I wouldn't be surprised, frankly, if Bailey ends up working out for the Philadelphia 76ers. We saw just a few years ago with Ben Simmons a very similar situation. Philadelphia 76ers had the number 1 pick. Simmons, throughout the pre-draft process, declined and rejected invitations to work out for the 76ers, and that changed just a few days before the draft. Of course, the 76ers wound up selecting Ben Simmons. So, we have 48 hours as we're taping it now before the draft starts. A lot can change between now and then. Right now, I expect VJ Edgecombe would be the pick, but if Bailey ends up, making amends there with that front office. I think he's still very much in the mix at number 3.
Yeah, you don't. There's no rule that says somebody has to work out for you to select them.
Sure.
If he is selected without ever stepping foot in Philadelphia, he will not be the first prospect to ever be drafted by a franchise that didn't see him up close and get him in the building. As always, we'll see, but it's just a fascinating storyline. You think leading into the draft is just going to be Cooper Flag, and yet as we're 2 days out, the main story, like the trending topic, is apparently Ace Bailey. And I'm not even trying to be cute. I'm just speaking factually. It is wild to me to have this young man's career and then place it in the hands of a non-certified agent who is an ex-convict. Again, that's not a joke. That's a real thing. That is what Ace Bailey has done here. I wish him luck. Even before all of this became a big story, I was pretty consistent that I believe Trey Johnson from Texas was the third best prospect in this draft. Reasonable minds can disagree. I think reasonable minds do disagree, but where I break with the consensus is right here. I go Flag, I go Harper, but then I go Trey Johnson, a 6'5" guard, great athlete, shot 39.7% from 3 on 6.8 attempts per game, led all freshmen in scoring. I know the Sixers have good guards in Tyrese Maxey and Jerry McCain. I just don't let that move me off of the person I believe is the third best prospect in this draft, the best prospect available at this point in the draft. If Philadelphia doesn't see it that way, then, again, Sam Presti and every other GM don't see everything the same way. But I would not, I guess this is what I'm trying to say. If I were in Philadelphia and my evaluation process led to me to Trey Johnson is the third best prospect in this draft, I am taking him, and I have little regard for what else is on my roster right now.
Yeah, all sorts of intrigue around the third pick here. I'm with you on Trey Johnson. I mentioned this on the podcast with Fink last week, and then GP and I talked about that some pods ago. I have Trey Johnson 2 on my board. I think he is going to be an extremely good future NBA player and easily make multiple All-Star games here. A trade also in this spot seems possible.
Yeah.
There's curiosity if Charlotte would actually covet Edgecombe so much that it will try and literally just hop up one pick so that Philly doesn't take him. And if that's the case, and Philly, for whatever reason, and Daryl Morey looks at his board and he's got Johnson, Bailey, Edgecombe, and all these, and to a certain extent, like the guys that are like 3 to 6 feels quasi up in the air. I will say this: what's interesting is we're gonna get to VJ Edgecombe in a second. I don't think Edgecombe falls below 4, but I personally don't have him top 4 overall. That it will be intriguing to see what Philly does with. I'm gonna guess they don't trade it, but I think there's a significant chance that it winds up happening there. And yeah, where Bailey winds up, we'll get to that in just a second. And by a second, I literally mean right now, because for the purpose of our mock, I've got the 4th pick. I'll send Ace to Charlotte here. This. For our listeners and viewers, we are combining what we think could happen in addition to adding our own, interpolations of these players, how they project. Bailey to Charlotte, to me, between Sixers at 3, Charlotte at 4, Utah at 5, Washington at 6, New Orleans at 7. Bailey at one time was seen to have a 2 to 4 range, and now it's like 3 to 8. Mm-hmm. We're speaking of what GP just said before there. He has hurt his stock seemingly, unless Philly is going to be unfazed by this and take him at 3. I've got him at Charlotte at 4. I think his ceiling is the second best of any player in the draft. Only Flag has a higher ceiling if he hits. Again, this is if you hit, and it's best case scenario. Ace Bailey, I think, could have an opportunity to thrive and flourish even more as a professional in the right situation with the right team and be a guy who is capable of averaging north of 25 a game if it all goes right. The problem is people don't know if it's going to all go right, and people don't know how long it's going to take for him to develop into that kind of player. He's not going to come into the league next season, probably not, and be a guy who is instant offense and adding to any type of culture of most of these teams here, Philly included, and turning that around. What he is by year 2, what he is by year 4, and really what he is by like year 6 or so, that's what you're drafting on, I guess. But with the way the NBA is now, like keep in mind when you're talking about a lot of these players that we're discussing and how they're going to get picked, a lot of these guys inevitably will find their footing with the second franchise they land at. We were just talking about the current MVP and where that was the case overall. So I'm intrigued by that. I will have Bailey going 4 to Charlotte, and that is because of where I have him big board overall. I'm going to put faith in his talent winning out, but as I say every year, and it's worth reminding every year, Talk about the top 5 or 6 guys in this class, and there are many reasons to like a lot of them. Reality is at least 2 of them probably are just going to wind up not hitting nearly to the level of the others. We'll look back in 5 years and be like, huh, that was a thing. And now look where they are now. I think Bailey is at most risk of any guy in the top 6. Personally, to me, he's at the most risk of having the farthest fall.
Yeah, on that note, like I always find it interesting leading into a draft, we spend months writing about these players, talking about these players, talking to people about these players, talking on camera about these players. And I'm telling you, after Wednesday night, about 20 of these dudes who are selected, maybe 15, but you'll get the point. You will never say their name again. You'll never discuss them again. Like a lot of these guys do just disappear. They just disappear. And even the ones that you think are like, he's an incredible prospect, he'll just disappear. And then somebody taken in the second round will become a real thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of these guys, like I have said probably more words about, I don't know, I'm just going to throw somebody out here. I've probably said more words.
Colin Murray Boyles.
I've probably said more words about Danny Wolf over the last 2 months than I might ever say again.
That's incorrect. He's going to hit.
I would just refuse to talk about him then. But I'm not going to say his name just to prove the point.
He's going to be a Memphis Grizzly.
That would be tough.
Yeah.
If he ends up in Memphis, I've already sworn I'll never say his name again. It's going to be tough.
Yep.
I'll figure it out.
Yep.
I'll figure it out.
KB, you're next at number 5, Utah.
Yeah, number 5 for the Jazz. I'm going to select VJ Edgecombe, who I think will be the number 3 pick. One and done from Baylor. A 35% three-point shooter in his one season with the Bears. Last season, he is a 99th percentile athlete, maybe the best athlete in this class. And again, I think a huge reason why I would select him at number 3 in this draft. A big believer in his defense, just his physical frame, his intangibles, the way that he plays, I think is going to translate at a really high level. There's a little bit of untapped playmaking with him as well. So just a two-way guard who doesn't have a lot of weaknesses in his game, I think would make a lot of sense for the Jazz at number 5.
So I've got the Wizards at number 6. And this is where I believe the betting markets now have Ace Bailey falling.
Yep.
And it is somewhat by design. So like we can talk about how chaotic this pre-draft process is. And going from 3 to 6, just that little bit of a drop is the difference over the first 2 years of a rookie contract of about $6 million. So he's leaving real money on the table, but there is some reporting that suggests this is what he wants. He would rather be in Washington at 6 than other places at 4 or 5. So maybe he gets what he wants, but in this mock draft, he's now off the board, which leaves me to select Concanipple out of Duke, who is now showing up in the top 5 of various mock drafts, in part because of the Ace Bailey situation. Norlander had a terrific piece on him deep in the season. I think at this point, people are familiar. He was the Robin to Cooper Flagg's Batman, but at basically any other school, he could have been the Batman. Yep. Maybe the best shooter in this draft, although Trey Johnson might have an argument against him. Liam McNeely might have an argument to get into that conversation, but he obviously shot it terrifically at Duke. And on the run through the NCAA tournament, he was at 19 points, 63.6% shooting from beyond the arc. Just obviously hammered home all of the stuff that you like about him. And I would just for a variety of reasons, he will get called a shooter. Oh yeah, but he's a basketball player. He's not just a shooter. He can guard his position better than I think some probably realize. This is a well-rounded guy and somebody who I don't think there's any doubt, barring injuries, of course, he's going to be in the league for a long time.
Yeah, KB, your thoughts first, and I'll hop in on Knipple here.
Yeah, I think Knipple's the best shooter in this class. Shot 40+% from three-point range. He was 90+ percentile on catch and shoot, on true jump shots. Just a very versatile scorer who can do it in a variety of ways. And, there was an interview, I think it was during the NCAA tournament with Con Knipple, where someone kind of asked him to evaluate himself, like what are some strengths, what are some weaknesses, and basically I'm paraphrasing it and maybe being, a little too blunt here, but he was like, I'm kind of just a white guy who isn't super athletic. And, that's how he wins. He wins by being smarter than everyone. He's really good playing off of 2 feet. He's really savvy at being able to read and manipulate defenses at a high level. So, I don't think there's a lot of holes in Knippel's game. I have a lot of confidence that he's going to be a really quality NBA player for a long time. And I think there's a lot of value in that, just knowing that, hey, you could take an Ace Bailey, and if everything hits, he could be a multi-time all-star because he can score it and he has great size, unlike anyone else in this draft class. Well, I know Con Knippel is going to be productive in his role for a very long time. And, I think I would be very willing to spend a top 5 pick on Con Knippel. So at number 6 for the Wizards, I think this would be great value.
Yeah, this is his floor. I think Charlotte at 4 is his ceiling. Certainly a very good possibility there. For a couple notes on him, I do love that he's bringing back the park down the middle feathery look. It's just you don't see that at the professional level in almost any sport anymore. So I mean it's a strong statement there. And just to see a badass on the floor who's rocking that kind of haircut takes some. He's not short on confidence. Let's put it that way. Knippel's rise has been intriguing because. Hear from a few scouts that go check out Duke practice back in the preseason. I was also there in the preseason, but even in advance of me getting there, there started to be some real buzz of okay, this guy probably is going to be a first-round pick. And one of the biggest reasons why is he's a legitimate defender. No, not a 99th or 90th percentile kind of athlete, but really smart, really tough, plays through his chest often, really good at switching. Adequate enough lateral quickness to say the least, and it was the defense that really put him in that conversation. Then he goes out and he shoots what he does. He then reinforces his stock when Flag gets hurt in the ACC tournament. Knippel goes out and helps Duke win the ACC championship, player of the most valuable player in that ACC tournament, and it's all validated. He's going to be an extremely good NBA player. I will be surprised if Knippel does not stick in the league for 10 years. I think he has the shooting and the adroitness overall to make it happen. Wizards, by the way, if you're, they haven't been a relevant franchise, but in just talking to a variety of different sources in this year's cycle, apparently there's a lot of real positive feedback on the new people in place running that front office in the direction of the franchise. Now we'll see if they can actually produce results over the next couple of years and truly turn it around. But it's the one franchise, even more than the Hornets. Yes, Nada, even more than the Hornets in this top 6 who are, unfortunately just been in this vortex they can't get out of there. If they get Knippel to fall to him at 6, they should obviously sprint into call to make the pick. But it will be intriguing to see how we know what 1 and 2 is going to be. How 3 through 6 falls is going to be super interesting. And then from there, it gets even more intriguing. I've got the pick at 7 with the Pelicans. And I'm going to go here. I also went, I'm putting a player in that I think I'm a little bit higher on than the general prognosticators and the consensus out there. I will go Kasper Siakachonis from Illinois. Good size, good shooter that I think that he will grow into a much more reliable and consistent shooter as a pro than he did at Illinois, where he had his ups and downs. He has a very, very good quality in his game to being able to see passing lanes, anticipate body movement. I actually think there's a chance that where he is, and I think Danny Wolf's even got some of this as well, and not just those two. I think Cedric Coward, who we'll get to in a second, has some of this as well. There are certain players that have skill sets that the college level can see some success, but once they actually get playing at the NBA level with bigger players, with smarter players, and more experienced players, it actually accentuates their capabilities all the more. I think that's Siakachonis overall. He plays well within himself. He's actually in watching him for, I must have seen him play, I don't know, 22, 23 times last season overall. There were some times where the chaos would get too much for him, but he does seem to almost embrace that element of what basketball can be. So I've got him going to New Orleans at 7. I think that they could absolutely use him positionally in terms of fit overall. I think this makes sense. KB, I'll send it right back to you, then GP chime in, I guess, as you need be. Too high, too low, just right for you with Siakachonis going to NOLA.
Yeah, this is about right. I expect his range is probably somewhere between 6 and 10 in this draft. I would be surprised if Fears is drafted, Jeremiah Fears, who we'll talk about in a minute, if Fears is drafted behind Siakachonis. But, I think the fit and where he's selected at number 7 would make a lot of sense. You kind of highlighted some of the highs of his game, which is he can make every pass in the book. He had, a 26+% assist rate. That's really good. He's got really good size at, a 6'6". he doesn't have, elite athleticism or burst necessarily, but he does make up for it in a lot of ways, just in terms of, similar to Concanipo, actually, just really good playing off of 2 feet. He's very savvy, really good finisher around the basket, which I think bodes well for him at the NBA level, just because he is able to kind of overcome some deficiencies in terms of his athletic ability. The turnovers, I think, were a tad concerning last season at Illinois. 25% turnover rate, which is basically in line with his assist rate. And see, I think that's probably an area where he needs to clean that up pretty substantially. If you're projecting him to be a future point guard, that is I think probably a huge red flag. I think probably hoping that he can be some sort of connective piece in the NBA, not necessarily your true point guard, just because the concerns that he showed with his turnovers. And then you're talking about some issues with his shooting as well, where, shot 32% from 3. So, there's some areas where you'd hope to see him improve a little bit, but I am with you, Norlander, on the whole. Like, I really like him as a prospect. I would take him inside the top 10, and this would make sense at number 7, I think, for the New Orleans Pelicans.
I agree with KB. This is Jakaconich's range, but I also would take Jeremiah Fears off the board before I took him off the board. So, KB, with that, why don't you go ahead and get Jeremiah Fears off the board?
Yeah, my little Oklahomie. Jeremiah Fears, someone who actually was top 10 in usage rate last season among major conference players at the Division I level. We're talking about someone who's one of the youngest players in this draft class, actually reclassified up a year, played at the University of Oklahoma as a young teenager. He's kind of, I think, guys, like the Moneyball meme reincarnated, where, during, I don't know if you've seen the movie or not, Peter Brand shows Billy Bean, a prospect who looks great, and he does all these amazing things, but he can't hit, or he can't, it's like, it's kind of a major red flag. It feels the same with Jeremiah Fears, where he's exceptional with the ball. He can create paint touches at a high level. You look at it, like his ball handling mixtape, it is phenomenal. He looks fantastic, but that's kind of how I feel about his shooting too. I think there's some real red flags with his shooting. Struggled last season, in particular from 3-point range. Last season shot 28.4% from 3-point range. And I think that's an area of concern, and why he could end up slipping later than maybe expected, just because I think there are some concerns about projecting that to the NBA level. But, I think if some things hit right, he could end up being a star in this league. And, at number 8 for the Brooklyn Nets, who have 4 first-round picks, I think I would be very willing and eager to take a chance on someone like Jeremiah Fears.
Yeah, Chief, I'll just hop in here real quick, because then you've got the pick after this. This is one of my biggest sellers. I don't have him as a top 20 prospect in the class. I think he's too small. He's an atrocious defender. If you're going to have a top 10 pick on a guard like him, he's got really good athleticism. He is good with the ball in his hands. There's no doubt about that. He was not good as an attack. For all the athleticism and sometimes creativity he had, was not a good player around the rim at all. Do we see that jumping at the next level? I don't know. There's just going to be inevitably a couple of guys that get picked too late, and they should have been 20 spots higher, and there's going to get guys in the top 10, and they should have been 10 or so spots lower. For me, this is just, it is nothing personal against the player. I'm just trying to evaluate guys that I saw, how I think I project, and I'm a big seller on him. If you told me he was there at 18, 16, I get it. 21, yeah, hell yeah, I'm in. But with the top 10 pick here, if you were going to be his size and be taken with a top 8 overall pick, I think you probably need to be something bordering on special in the NBA, and I don't think Fears has that game.
I will say he does play the position where you can kind of get by being a below average shooter if you are physically gifted in a way that just makes it hard for people to stay in front of you. I live in a city that has a franchise point guard who is described that way. He's not Ja Morant, a great 3-point shooter, or even a good 3-point shooter, although he's better than he used to be. But
Fears never even, but you look at where Morant was coming out of college, and Fears isn't that either.
No.
I'm not saying you are, but just as a means of comparison for our listeners and viewers, he's a tier down at least from even what Morant was coming out of Murray State.
I believe that. I agree. I'm just saying that if you can keep people on skates, you can play in that league with the ball in your hands. Yeah. Obviously, it's helpful if you also have the shot to go with it. And if this doesn't get up to a respectable number, then this will be too high for him. But if it does get to a respectable number, it will be too low. because the other stuff is there. Norlander, you make an important point. He will get targeted on defense. He's only like 180 pounds. He's very, I don't want to say weak, but like he's not strong. You wouldn't call him strong. And so he's going to struggle with that. The shot is a source of concern. But he was an 85% free throw shooter, which is not always, but often an indication that there's some feel there. There's some shooting ability there that maybe just hadn't materialized yet. So I'm a believer, but I understand I understand the concerns. At 9 with the Raptors, I've got him taking Kaman Malawach out of Duke. 7'2" center, like nearly a 7'7" wingspan. He's just an unusually large human. Forget basketball player. There aren't many humans walking around on the planet who measure like Malawach and can move like Malawach. Now, we went through an era in the NBA where I had actual front office members in the NBA tell me they would not spend a top 10 pick on a traditional center, like ever again. I just don't think that's true anymore. I don't know that it was ever true across the board of the NBA, but let's look at these playoffs. I mean, Oklahoma City, I know Chet Holmgren's not a traditional big, but they start two bigs in OKC. The Lakers tried to play small when they couldn't get that Mark Williams trade deal when it got rescinded, and they got destroyed by Rudy Gobert. Like, you need people like this on your basketball team now. If only for the playoffs, you're going to need somebody who is just a massive presence, and there's nobody better equipped to do that for a long time than Malawach. I know the last impression was bad, 21 minutes in a loss, 0 rebounds against Houston, but that's just an outlier game. That's not who he is. And keep in mind, that was at a time when there were reports about deportations, and there was some thought
that did happen. But to be fair, that literally broke in the middle of the game, so he wouldn't have known about that before the game tipped.
My memory was that it was circulating in advance of the game to where it would have been hard to keep that out of his head. But
maybe that's true, actually. Maybe I have that wrong. I remember the game happening and it being like, it's unfair to ask this dude about this because this stuff just happened in the middle of the game.
Maybe
I still remember that. So there could have been other stuff circling. We don't need to get
let's not get distracted by that point. Yeah. The larger point is that was just an outlier performance. That's not who he is. And I'd be aware of it. I'd make note of it, but I would not let it deter me from selecting him in the top 10 of this draft.
KB, where's your rank overall on Malawach? Where do you have him on your big board?
I have him at number 9. And I love to see GP pushing the size still matters agenda. He's 7'2", as he mentioned, 7'6", 0.75 wingspan was his reported wingspan at the NBA Combine. And you can go and search on Google if you want, but I wrote a story from the Combine on Kaman Malawach, who began playing basketball at 13 years old, someone who actually first loved soccer, but he told me, frankly, like he was so sick of soccer because he grew so big and he was so skinny that people kept just pushing him into the goal. And he was sick of that. And
that's what Houston did to him.
Yeah. Yeah. And so exactly. Yes. And so obviously he picked up basketball a little bit late in his career, in his life, and has flourished, has become a potential lottery pick, and was very impactful last season for a 35-win Duke team that was top 5 on offense and defensive efficiency. And he was a very, very important player in doing that, alongside obviously Cooper Flagg and Con Knipple, who we've already mentioned as top 10 picks in this class.
Malawach, I think, can switch 2 to 5 at the NBA level. He literally switched 1 to 5 at the college level. And yes, as I said on the podcast with Fink, put in my mock draft, it is absolutely on the table that he is the best defensive player to come out of this class. Needs to be taken with the top 10 pick. If he goes as high as 6, it wouldn't stun me because of the attributes on the defensive end. Plenty of questions about how he fits in on a role in offense and how you utilize him. I get all that stuff. But, man, he's got some serious fortes as a potential all-league defender. I've got the 10th pick with the Suns, who now have this pick after the Kevin Durant trade over the weekend. And for here, I'm going to stick with the player that I had in my mock at 10. and is actually 10th on our prospect rankings overall. And that's Carter Bryant out of Arizona. If you want a little bit of a deeper conversation as to, okay, here we go. We got a guy who didn't start in college, didn't average, north of 22, 23 minutes a game. You look at the numbers or whatever. Why would a guy like this go top 10? I asked this question to Adam Finkelstein on the mailbag episode last week, and we got into about 5 or 6 minutes. So go back if you have not already listened to that. Some really good perspective on all of that. He certainly seems to have the momentum as a prospect, Bryant does, to be a top 12 pick. We're going to send him here, 10 to the Suns. What's intriguing is now you've got a team that now has this pick that didn't have it until all of 48 hours ago or so. And so what are the Suns prioritizing? That franchise in general is something that's hard to even target, see what they're looking for. Are they going to settle at 10? Are they going to try and trade out again? We'll see. This is just the range I'm trying to project where Bryant's going to be. The 10th spot overall seems to fit nicely. He defensively can translate immediately as a prospect there. We'll see how he grows on the offensive end, but exceedingly good scouting reports on him throughout the pre-draft process. It's not just the combine, it's other things as well. And there's also he's 19. Is he done fully growing? How much weight can he put on? He's the kind of frame and athlete that if you put on an additional like 20 pounds, it's only going to probably likely increase his game. Some players are better at putting on weight and actually making that an attribute and becoming all the better. Some players aren't. Bryant seems to have the framing game for that. So yeah, we'll send him here 10 to Phoenix.
Yeah, I've got him in this range as well. I'm a believer in the switchability on defense. Everybody needs players like this. I know I've said this before. You're hesitant to select a guy like Mikal Bridges in the top 10 because he's just a role player. And then he becomes a great role player and you give up 5 first-round picks for him. So, like, these guys are that valuable. And I think Carter Bryant projects as the best possibility among 3-and-D wings at this point in the draft. You mentioned the pre-draft, all the stuff is coming back positive, like strong family, high character, and impacted winning at Arizona. Like didn't play a lot or maybe didn't play as much as he should have, but the on-court numbers for him were better than the off-court numbers for him as it pertains to Arizona as a basketball team. So, wasn't an All-American candidate or anything like that, but can still be a lottery pick based off what people believe he'll be able to do at the NBA level in time. Before we get to the Blazers at number 11, let's pay some bills. Let's get a word from our partners.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
Okay, KB, the Blazers are on the clock. What are they going to do?
They're going to select Cedric Coward from Washington State, one of the biggest pre-draft risers that I have seen here over the last couple of years, kind of reminiscent of Jalen Williams from Santa Clara, Jalen Williams, NBA champion Jalen Williams. Cedric Coward, a very interesting story. I want to actually toss it over to Norlander because he wrote a story about it, but, began his career at the Division III level, played at Eastern Washington, ended up at Washington State. He had such a precipitous rise during the pre-draft process that he was committed to Duke, and that just seemed impossible because he just kept rising from, hey, this guy might be a really interesting second round gamble to, okay, this guy's going to be a lottery pick, and he is definitely not going back to college. So I think it would make sense for the Blazers at number 11. He's 6'5". He has a 7'2" wingspan, career 39% three-point shooter. Physically, he's off the charts, gifted, built like a brick, and can do a number of different things. It kind of built in a lab for what you kind of hope for in a modern day NBA wing.
I have a big feature up on him that published a few days ago. I would guess I've sent, heard some feedback from some NBA folks and stuff like that, which I appreciate. And I told some of them, I would guess I've interviewed in some capacity in person, over the phone, like, I don't know, 300 plus, maybe 400 plus college athletes since I've been doing this. Cedric Coward is one of the 5 most impressive players I've ever talked to. He is a rare dude. He just is. And in fact, coincidentally enough, in terms of just talking, I went to Brooklyn the day before we worked out the Nets. We sat down, we talked for like 90 minutes. A lot of like that discussion was so reminiscent. And this was not by design initially, but as coincidence would have it, I profiled Jalen Williams 3 years ago. And there are a ton of parallels just in the way these guys are wired. Their games are not exactly the same. They can fill similar spots on a roster, I guess, overall. But if you told me that Coward did rise to be, the third, like Williams right now is a top 20 player in the NBA, I guess maybe even top 15 and the second best player in the NBA champion. I don't know if Coward's ceiling can be that, although he absolutely believes it can be, if not more than that. I do think he has a healthy chance at stepping in and being an impactful pro for a long time, and a guy who validates his draft spot. If indeed he winds up I don't think he'll go this high. Not that it can't. I was told, as I had in the story, there have been 3 teams holding lottery picks that have expressed genuine interest toward Coward's camp. Like a couple of teams in the lottery have interviewed him, done that stuff. There are 3 teams that at least if they were to select him, Coward and his camp will not be surprised if it comes to that on Wednesday night. Real quick on the backstory. I don't want to go too long here, but I did do a 5,000 word feature on this guy. There's never been anything like it. It's insane. And please go read the story if you haven't already, because this is the goods. This is why I love covering the draft and covering college sports. It's for stuff like this, because this has never happened ever. There have been more than 8,000 players drafted since the mid 1940s. No one has ever done this. I'll try and be as abbreviated as possible. He is not good enough to play varsity at a public high school until his junior year. The summer before his junior year, which is really the most critical year for talent evaluation, it's COVID. He's frustrated in his overall game, and he even admitted to me, he's like, I wasn't good enough and I wasn't trying to be good enough, but he wants to be on a better AAU team than he is. He's not. He quits AAU that year. There are that you do that, your chances of making the NBA, whatever, however small they are, they diminish tenfold because of that decision for almost anyone else. So doesn't play AAU for a year, makes the varsity team, and then it's not that he just didn't get a D1 offer. We have had players like that. Derek White didn't get a D1 offer, and he wound up making the league. We've seen that story happen before, although it's rare. Scottie Pippen didn't get a D1 offer back in the day. That's probably 2 Pippen references in the first 40 minutes. He had, guys, 2 Division III schools recruited him to play basketball. It's not like, okay, he wasn't good for D1, but some D2s were hot on him. He could have played. No, 2. And he was such a good academic student in high school that the schools that he was going to consider, one was in Carolina, in North Carolina, and the other one was Willamette up near Portland in Oregon. And it was as much for the academics as it was anything else. So he goes, he plays there. The team was 1-29 the 2 years before he played there. And then they only won 6 games the year that he was there. And then as I write in the story, the only reason why he even ends up at Eastern Washington is because then Coach David Riley, who's now at Washington State, and Coward went with him there, he follows that league, that D3 league, because he used to play in it, not at Willamette, but a different school. So, but only because he has this devotion and connection. Riley at this time, I think, was like 34, maybe 33 years old. He's like a young coach. His college days are barely more than a decade behind him. He's like, all right, we'll talk on the Willamette Portland game. And that night, Coward's the best player on the floor, catches his eye. As another coincidence, a guy on Riley's staff had Fresno ties, used to be a high school coach in Fresno. So he kind of tracks from afar. At the end of that season, Coward clearly good enough to at least try going in the portal. So he goes in the portal. Eastern Washington beats out New Mexico State and Idaho, who recruited him, but even Coward told me it wasn't even close. Eastern Washington came to me with a plan and showed me how I could do this. He's one of the most efficient players coming off the bench his first year. He makes the leap a second year. I'm going to gloss over a lot of stuff. It's all detailed in the story. And then he's good enough to at least try, after a second year at Eastern Washington, try the pre-draft process. He doesn't get a combine invite, does not get a G League combine invite, goes into the portal. Number of schools offer him big money, including Texas Tech, which was close to $1 million. He goes, and I didn't ask him for the number at Washington State, but it's not even close to that. Okay. It's not even remotely close. He sticks with that coaching staff. It rips his shoulder in practice 6 games into the season after he looked awesome to start. Awesome. And he's still going to go in the top 20. This is not supposed to happen. It is an incredible story. It's a testament to his work ethic. I got more details on his recovery, his rehab, all of that. Talked to his coaching staff, talked to his mom. His grandfather, one of them, won a gold medal on a relay team for the Team USA in 1976 at the Olympics. Awesome dude, awesome story. I will not be stunned whatsoever by any success this guy has. I love KB put him this high. I don't think he'll go this high, but when you watch the draft on Wednesday night, just be more aware of his story because it is incredible. He's the fastest riser and a super, super cool story.
In my personal mock draft that updated earlier today, I have him 16th, headed to the Memphis Grizzlies. He's going to be my neighbor.
That would be phenomenal if he gets. There's a couple teams,
yeah,
that are sitting there that he's got to get past OKC at 15.
That's what scares me.
And frankly, San Antonio at 14 wouldn't surprise me either. But yeah, we'll see. Grizzlies at 16, if he's there, I would leap for it.
He just seems like the type of prospect the smart franchises want.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
At number 12, Chicago Bulls picking. I've got him taking Derek Queen out of Maryland, the one and done big, just a super skilled big who showed all of that in the NCAA tournament. Had the buzzer beater against Colorado State, got 27 points against the eventual national champions. He could go higher than this. I have seen him lower than this. And there is some thought that the pre-draft process, if it's been great for, say, Carter Bryant, it hasn't been as great for Derek Queen. There's some concerns about his conditioning, how seriously or how focused he is on that. And I don't think it's the type of thing that makes him slip out of the lottery, but the things you're hearing just in recent days, as a prospect with the draft approaching, you always want to hear this guy has blown people away in the pre-draft process. And I have not heard that about Derek Queen too much.
KB, you?
That is in line with what I've heard. And having watched him at the NBA draft combine, I think there's also concerns about like his shooting mechanics.
Yeah.
The shot is something that I think you're hoping to project out. It's not necessarily something that is a foundational piece of him as a prospect right now. And watching him at the NBA draft combine, I actually talked to a college coach who was there watching Queen do his workouts because he had a player who was doing in the same pod doing a workout. And he said, like, what's up with Derek Queen's shot? And I was like, man, I noticed that too. And he had some sort of like hitch at the top of his release that I did not see during his time at Maryland. I think it is a concern. And I think it's something that I've even heard during his pre-draft workouts is just, it's been circled. Something that like, the mechanics of his shot just don't seem to be completely settled. Now, he's a former 5-star recruit. He's been long considered one of the top 15 or so prospects in this class.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to sway him necessarily out of the lottery, but given all the situation with him right now, where the conditioning concerns and the shooting concerns, I think there's a real chance that he could end up slipping maybe a little bit further than maybe we expect on draft night.
I think his stock is a little bit tough to pin down. If he goes to Chicago at 12, it actually won't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
In spite of what we said here, I would put his range 10 to 18 overall. Really good intangibles, really smart player, and I think he finds a way to make it work. I understand some of the drawbacks there. This is another player that I featured during the season. Came away extremely impressed. Also someone who's, just sit down and have a conversation with him. You don't feel like you're talking to someone. He's now 20. He just felt like I was talking to a guy in mid-30s who had lived a long and happy, successful life. Wish nothing for the best, but the best for him. He may, although some of the aspects of his game do seem like he's got skill sets that will work at the NBA level regardless. I almost wonder if he is a player that ultimately needs to go to the right kind of situation to have him. Some players, they can't be broken. Maybe he needs to go to the right spot to ensure it, but I'm in on Queen making it work at the NBA level, and that's a guy who a year ago I would have been like, "There's no way that guy should be a one and done. He's going to need more." He's flipped me entirely. I've got he's
the best passer among bigs in this class. Like
I think him and Wolf go head to head. I think Wolf is almost as good, if not as good.
And on the website, we have scouting reports for all 60 prospects right now. Queen is. We also have player comps, and one comp for Queen we have is Alperen Şengün, who's had immense success in the NBA. He's one of the focal points of the Houston Rockets. And, a huge reason that he's found success is because of his playmaking as a offensive hub for the Rockets. I can see a similar path to success for Queen in the NBA. If he cleans up some other things, I think there's a real chance he could hit in a big way.
All right, I've got the 13th pick with the Hawks. I've got Noah Asenge from France here. I'll say he doesn't wind up going to Atlanta on Wednesday, but again, I'm trying to, when we got to this part of our mock, I thought he probably won't slip past 15, and I'm not convinced San Antonio or OKC will be the play there, although I could see it happening for a number of reasons with either of those franchises. He will be the highest drafted international player. Questions about the shooting, questions about strength, but he's 18. He'll grow into it. Right now, can he switch as both a 3 and a 4? We'll see a little bit of a project, but this is, obviously GP and KB more than GP now, but GP and I are not like diving into the tape on Noah Asenge in the middle of February. It's just not happening. So I'm going off of what KB's saying, talking to a few NBA people who right now, Asenge and then a guy we've got, Berenger, further down. The vibe is like these guys are going top 16. So I had to fit them in there somewhere. I send them 13 to Atlanta, KB.
Yeah, that sounds about right. This is someone who's from France. He's had a very strong pre-draft process, big frame, kind of like a big swing. We'll see kind of where he goes on draft night, but like I've heard there's real interest from teams who are picking inside the top 10 for Asingwe. That feels like a little bit rich. And even a month ago, like I thought he might not be a first round pick for sure. So yeah, I think 13 feels about right for Asingwe. His draft stock, I think his range is pretty wide, but there's a lot of interest in him. Just given the last couple of weeks, there's a lot of steam around Asingwe.
And that takes us to 14, San Antonio Spurs on the board. KB, you got the pick.
Yes, I'm going to select Colin Murray Boyles from South Carolina at number 14. I selected Dylan Harper at number 2. I'm coming back here, adding some size for the Spurs front court, some defense. I think there's been a lot of behind the scenes. It seems like the Spurs may be interested in adding some size next to Victor Wembanyama. Obviously, they're pretty set in the backcourt. They have Stephon Castle, who was the rookie of the year last year. They have De'Aaron Fox, who they traded for. Now they have Dylan Harper. I don't know if Colin Murray Boyles would be like the perfect fit for pairing next to Victor Wembanyama, but he's someone who's very physically mature, produced at a high level at South Carolina in 2 seasons, a physical interior post presence. And I think someone who, with his passing ability, with his defensive versatility, could just kind of be a joker, fit in a number of different roles for the Spurs. And obviously Victor Wembanyama is there. He's going to do a lot of everything on both ends. So I think Murray Boyles could help kind of fill the holes where needed.
With the 15th pick, it's the Oklahoma City Thunder, the reigning NBA champs. And I know some people look at this like, well, what do they even need? But you know what they need? Players who are going to replace their role players when their role players become too expensive.
Yeah.
They'll pay Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They'll pay Chet. They'll pay Jalen Williams.
Yes.
And the rest of these guys are just not going to be able to get in Oklahoma City what it is they're going to be able to get elsewhere.
You're going to send Unk packing? He's gone?
Unk's gone.
Russo, I'll see you later. You're doing this in the Ball Brotherhood right now, GP?
I don't want to do that. That's not what I want to do. But the way the system is in place now, and I don't like this. I actually think this is a fundamental flaw in the NBA. I don't think you should be able to hire somebody as brilliant as Sam Presti, have him do as brilliant a job as he's done, and then based on the rules, like quite literally be unable to keep it together because without paying $500 million in taxes or something. But this is where we're at, and this is what the owners wanted, and so here we are. But they're not just Oklahoma City drafting for depth. They don't need anything that this draft has right now. But what they do need is when these role players become too expensive, they need to have guys on rookie contracts who can step in and fill that role. The Nuggets were not able to do this after winning a championship, and it's cost them. Oklahoma City is going to be better equipped than anybody perhaps in the history of the NBA to do what it is we're talking about and actually string NBA titles or win more than just this one. But if let's just say they win 3 titles over the next 10 years, they might all come with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They might all come with Chet. They might all come with Jalen Williams, but the other pieces are going to be swapped out. And that's what you're trying to find in this and every other draft where you're making first-round picks. With all that said, I've got him taking Liam McNeely out of UConn. He only shot 31.7% from three-point range, but as we've talked about a lot, that is not a number that people are obsessed with because there's so much data on him dating back to high school grassroots that suggests like he's a real shooter. He is a real shooter on the wing. And so you wonder, okay, well, why did he shoot below 32% at UConn? Honestly, I think some of it was just he was being asked to do more than he was maybe capable of doing. He had that ankle injury mid-season that derailed things and, cost him valuable time. He had an up and down freshman season, but he's a 6'7" wing who can really shoot it, at least in theory. And that's going to be enough, I think, to get him selected in the top 20 of this draft.
All right, I'll keep it moving. We've got the Grizzlies. I've got the Grizz pick at 16 here. Asa Newell from Georgia. I think Newell's range is probably 13 to 24. It seems to be a bit wide. He's a big GP, the Grizz roster, much better than I do. I do think that he's got a chance of having the right physical profile and doing the right kind of things that franchise, puts a priority on to be able to stick. He's got to work on some of his offensive game. There's no doubt about it, but good athleticism, really good length. I think he can grow it. I think it's interesting when you get into this range, because depending on what kind of player you are and the franchise you go to, if you can really home in on 2 or 3 specific things that you just say, these are the things that I'm going to become top 10, top 15, top 20 level in the NBA, regardless. Like, I am going to dedicate myself to this. You can really carve out yourself one hell of a career. And by the way, an ultra rich career in the process. I think Asa Newell has the potential to grow into one of the best rebounders in this class if he dedicates himself to that. And then by the way, grow into a nice little pick and pop big. He's 6'9", 6'10", good muscle build already. I'm probably more aggressive on him here than he'll wind up getting picked, but I think there is a healthy chance that if a team opts to go 16, 17 or better on him, that he's got a really good work ethic. Background checks are all going to clear. So I go with the Grizz him at 16.
I'll just add real quickly about the Grizzlies roster. It's a little bit, having Jaren Jackson Jr. in your front court is a little bit like having Victor Wembanyama in your front court. I'm not saying Tripp is Wemby, but they're both incredibly versatile, front court players who can kind of float on defense, float on offense, comfortable all over the court. Both of them are, defensive players of the year. And my larger point is that you can play anybody with them. Like, there are some starting centers or starting power forwards in the NBA where if you're trying to add front court pieces, you have to think along the lines of, how does he fit with this guy? Can he play with this guy? And you don't really have to think about that with Jaren Jackson Jr. or, in San Antonio with Wemby. They can play with any type of front court player. If you need them to play center, they can play center. If you want them to play with a traditional center and be a stretch the floor 4, they can do that. And so, yeah, this is higher than I would have Asa Newell going, but I have no concerns about how he would fit next to Jaren Jackson Jr. because I think basically any kind of front court player can work next to Jaren Jackson Jr. Let's get us to the Timberwolves at number 17. KB, you're on the clock.
Yes, and I will select Nick Clifford from Colorado State. Minnesota made a big investment last draft with Rob Dillingham. Not entirely sure that they will go guard again, but I think Clifford would present some good value here that'd be really tough to pass up. Someone who spent 5 years in college, produced like an All-American last season at Colorado State. I think he can be like an instant 3-and-D impactful player for any NBA team. And, for the Minnesota Timberwolves specifically, competing at the top of the West, I think he could fill a role for a team that is looking to try and fill pieces next to, obviously, Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert. They also have some Naz Reid and Julius Randle have player options this offseason. So maybe they look to address the front court, but I think Nick Clifford here, I'm a little bit higher on him than maybe some others. This to me would be very tantalizing and probably too good a deal to pass up at 17.
GP, I'll hop in real quick here on Clifford. Very high, and I'm not as high as KB. I do like the daringness of this pick. I actually do like the fit overall, and I think he is a top 5 most likely dude when you or I are on the road in July and we see some summer league. Like, player picked after number 10, the top 5 most likely dude just to freaking ball out and look incredible in summer league. I think he is going to hit the ground running and be an immediately a player who's immediately willing to contribute anything and everything possible to be a force for good and positivity and helping a franchise there. I don't know if he'll go as high as 17. I don't think he's falling below like 22 or 23. Really, really do love his upside.
That brings us to the 18th pick, the Wizards. I've got him selecting Jace Richardson out of Michigan State. 6'1" combo guard, 6'6" wingspan. Dad obviously was a top 5 pick and a 14-year NBA veteran, so he's got the genes. And as our pal Sam Vecini has pointed out in his big draft preview, over the final 15 games, Jace Richardson averaged 16 points, shot 47% from the field and 42% from three. So he closed really strong. Good frame. He's a strong body, not a great athlete, but a good enough athlete, changes speeds well, knows how to use his body to create scoring opportunities, all of that stuff. And he's pretty good around the rim despite his size. But the size is an issue, particularly if he's playing off the ball. Just look at the top of this draft. The second player is going to be Dylan Harper. Jumbo guards. Stephon Castle. Like, the backcourts in the NBA are getting bigger than they have ever been, which I think by definition means it's harder to play in that league and flourish in that league at 6'1" than it has ever been. There are guys who got drafted just a few years ago, like Kennedy Chandler comes to mind, who I don't think would get drafted today. Like just based off of the size. I think the NBA has changed that much where positional size is really valued. And being this little can be difficult, but I'm going to trust that he'll figure it out. I'm going to trust that he'll figure it out and he'll stick in this league. But if somebody wanted to argue, I just don't feel comfortable spending a top 20 pick on a 6'1" guard who might need to play off the ball as much as he plays on the ball. I would nod and say I understand.
KB, quick thoughts on Richardson?
Yeah, I think probably I mostly agree with GP in that I think size still matters in the NBA, where at 6 foot and change, he is definitely undersized. He did measure like at 6'6" at the combine just with his wingspan. And there's a lot to like here. I think he's like pretty good on the ball as kind of a microwave scorer. I think he can do a number of things on offense that I think is pretty projectable. I go back to a story that I think Norlander, you wrote earlier this season, which was a quote from Tom Izzo talking about Jace Richardson shouldn't be allowed in Vegas because he is so smart and he consumes things, digests it, and understands it really well. So I think his just understanding of how to play basketball, his pedigree of being the son of Jason Richardson, there's a lot of things working in his favor, I think. And, obviously it's really hard to bet on guys who are maybe a tad undersized, but Jace Richardson is someone who I personally like maybe a little bit more than most. I have him as a top 20 prospect in this class. And I think he will end up sticking in some role in the NBA just because he is so smart. He thinks the game at a really high level. And the offensive skills, I think, are going to translate pretty seamlessly to the NBA.
He's got to, in order to stick, he's got to get there with his physicality and make some growth, because he wasn't a projected one-and-done player until we got to like February. But he does have a chance. And coincidentally enough, we'll go to 19 here. I've got Brooklyn. The player I have here, they're not polar opposites. They're not, but they're both guards. They're both point guards. But the player I have at 19 is going to get picked somewhere between, I would say his range is 15 to 24 at this point, probably. It's Yegor Demin out of BYU, who started the season hot, really started to flirt with like top 5 stock overall. And then he definitely leveled out, but he's the tallest point guard in the class. He's got as good of a passing acumen as anyone in the class, I think. When you really look at how he can run the floor, see the floor, what he brings there, that's what's going to make sure that he gets drafted in the first round. The shooting has so much to go. There's a lot to overcome there. I feel like he sometimes plays where he's got confidence, but he doesn't have conviction at certain points, which was a little bit worrisome considering when some of those moments happened last year on a good BYU team that still made the Sweet 16. But he somehow managed not to level up in a way that I expected him to down the stretch in the postseason conference tournament, NCAA tournament. But overall, I actually fairly in on him. I have him higher on my board than we have him here, but I am mocking him to Brooklyn at 19, almost regardless of the pick. Keep an eye on the Nets in general on Wednesday. They hold a lot of picks. It seems inevitable they're going to trade out of at least one of them. But I do think Demon is unquestionably a top 20 prospect in this class.
Yeah, I like that. I think his range is pretty broad, but he's the best passer in this class. He's 6'9". I project him as a true point guard, and there's questions about his defense. There's questions about his shooting, but I think at number 19, given Brooklyn's wealth of picks in this draft specifically, now I don't know if they keep all of them, but I do think that he needs to go to a team like that maybe has a chance or a reason to maybe stomach a little bit more risk, like a Nets who have multiple picks. And if he hits, if the defense starts to come around, if his shooting starts to come around, I think he could hit in a big way.
All right, that brings us to Miami with the 20th pick. KB, that's you.
Yes, and I'm going to select Norlander Kyle from France at number 20 for the Heat. I think probably the Heat are in a spot where they're going to address their backcourt in some way. I expect they probably take a look at Norlander Kyle if he's on the board here. I would expect Walter Clayton Jr. could be in the mix. Hugo Gonzalez could make some sense. Traor's from France. He's playing in the Pro A, the same league that produced Bilal Koulibaly and Victor Wembanyama over the last couple of years, guys who were, number one pick and a former lottery pick. Traor's someone who actually began the year as a top 10 prospect. He kind of struggled to start the year, but has consistently shown growth throughout the season. I think he could go somewhere in this range, probably 15 to 25. And given the fact that the Heat are probably going to address their backcourt in some way, and given the fact that Traor is going to go in this range, that is why I select him at number 20.
So that's 20 picks in the book, 10 more to go before we finish this thing up. Not if we can. Let's get one more word from our partners.
The crowd loves champions. Gladiator 2 is an epic spectacle.
Remarkable!
To amuse you is my only wish.
The glory is yours, not mine.
Very good. Gladiator 2, rated R. Now streaming on Paramount+.
So with the 21st pick, we got the Utah Jazz on the clock. I will have them selecting Danny Wolf out of Michigan, 6'11" center. Moved from the Ivy League to the Big Ten and didn't really miss a beat. 13.2 points, 9.7 rebounds for the Wolverines. He's got guard skills in a big man's body. That's like sentence one of the scouting report. And so you go, okay, how did that happen? Well, he was 6'3" when he was a freshman in high school. And by his junior season, he was 6'10". So he spent most of his life as a guard. And then hit the growth spurt, and these are the way sometimes these things happen. Better than some realized defender, a little bit of a polarizing prospect in the sense that I don't know, it doesn't look normal on the court the way he plays basketball, but he was awesome at Michigan, and I know there are people, and Norlander's one of them, who I'm a believer, obviously, but there are people who believe in him even more than what the 21st pick would suggest.
Major believer over here. I can't remember. We had to send in our own personal big boards. I had Wolf top 15 for sure. There's a few guys here. In fact, 20 who we have at 21 and 22. I just don't think they're not here on Wednesday night. And that's just a function of us trying to 3-man mock draft. You're going to pick players you have priority on. That's just going to happen inevitably. I will be shocked if Wolf is still sitting here at 21. The Jazz would be beyond thrilled if he is sitting there. GP gave most of it. Just a dazzling passer. He's also big. I mean, he has the size. He has the shooting. Defensively, he stepped it up last season at Michigan. He answered some real questions. In fact, I think part of why he's going to be taken somewhere between 13 and 19 in my estimation is because he proved himself not to be a turnstile on defense overall. I've got 22, but real quick, KB, do you want to hop in on anything on Wolf? Are you a buyer, seller? Real quick, what's the scouting report from you?
No, I think that's all right. You had him at 11 on your big board.
Yeah,
so.
I'm in on him. I think he's going to wind up being noticeably underdrafted, regardless when we look up and say 2029.
For sure.
Okay, I've got the 22nd pick, and I've got Jean Bérenger out of France. If Coward's rise has already kind of settled over the past 15 days, I would say Bérenger since first, second week of June, he seems to be on a little bit of a rocket here, and it seems destined to be taken. Some people think that he is really maybe there for the taking at 13 or 14 overall, and a team makes a big pick there. He's 6'10", he's 19, he's a big. I think he's got my scouting report is purely what other folks have told me on him, and he seems like he is able to grow into a player who is going to be highly productive. His stats, if you look at what he did playing in international play, it's not going to pop to you overall, but he can rebound, is 6'11", and there's just he is going to be too physically impressive, and because of his age, because I think he's 18 now, someone is going to see that they can turn him into a real legitimate player by the end of his first NBA contract, and it would shock everyone I've talked to if we have him here at 22. I think it will surprise people if he's like still there at 18 overall. So just keep that in mind as we go through the mock.
He's the third youngest prospect in the class. So very young. Cooper Flagg is the youngest player. He's, I think, the best shot blocker.
Real quick, Fears is 2, right? In that order, just so our listeners know. I think Fears is 2. He was a reclass Cooper.
Yes, I believe that's correct. And so Behringer's still very young, only 18 years old. He's the best shot blocker, I believe, in this class. He's a true big, kind of a rim runner, can finish lobs, obviously very good at blocking shots. I think, kind of hit the nail on the head. He's not going to be here on draft night Wednesday at number 22. I think he's going to go somewhere in the lottery, and maybe even higher. We'll see. But there is going to be a run, I think, on big men somewhere in the 20s in this draft on Wednesday. As you can see, kind of playing out in our mock exercise here, Danny Wolf, Joan Behringer, and no spoilers, but I have Thomas Sorber going off the board next at 23.
Well, take it away, KB. You're next up, 23 with the Pelicans. Let's have the scouting report.
Yeah, Thomas Sorber going off the board, number 23 for the Pelicans. Wouldn't be surprised if the Hawks considered him here a pick before this at 22. Seems like there's some interest there. The Pelicans have Yves Missi, but Sorber's a different kind of curveball type prospect. He's a physical interior type presence, someone who produced at a high level at Georgetown, was not expected to be a one and done. Very physical, just in the way that he plays, and someone who I think is going to be very efficient scoring inside of the perimeter. A very good rebounder, someone who's already very physically mature, measured very well at the NBA draft combine. Hard to pin down exactly where his stock is right now, because I think a month ago the expectation was he was going to go somewhere in the top 15 or so. I think that range is a little bit wider, but somewhere between 15 and 25 on draft night. He's a really interesting prospect who checks a lot of boxes with his measurables.
So that brings us to number 24, Oklahoma City Thunder picking again. I've got him taken Ben Seraf from Israel. He's another teenager point guard with good positional size, depending on what number you see at 6'5" or 6'6". Really understands how to play in pick and rolls, but there are concerns about two obvious things. The three-point shooting is just not there, and the athleticism is not necessarily what an NBA point guard would typically have. He would be a below-average athlete to play that position in this league and a below-average shooter to play that position in this league. So, a lot of stuff to work on. But again, if you're Oklahoma City, you're not trying to take somebody who can help you next season. You don't need anybody to help you next season. You need to get interesting prospects in your facility, into your franchise, and start developing them for whenever, again, these role players that helped them win a title earlier this week become too expensive to keep in Oklahoma City. Whether that's Liam McNeely, Ben Seraf, or anybody else they select, that's the mindset. You might not see these dudes again for 3 years on a basketball court, but you need to have them ready to go when you need them ready to go.
So I talked to one NBA person who thinks that there's a realistic scenario that he winds up being, right there with Demon, like 5 years from now, among the best passers in this class. And that's why his stock has now jumped to be a likely first rounder. Finkelstein talked about him on the mock, on the Mailbag podcast we did last week, and he was especially high on him relative to where he's projected to go. I've got the pick with the Magic at number 25. And this is a player that I think, if you truly could peer into every big board of every NBA franchise, if you told me that this guy was as high as like 13 or 14 on some boards and as low as like 37 or 38 on others, I'd believe you. I think he has no business waiting until 25, and I cannot imagine him getting to 25 in Orlando not taking him. It is the in-state product from, just this past season, obviously, and that is Walter Clayton Jr., third best player in college basketball last season. He's got the shot making. Oh, by the way, we have a we did a video treatment on him, a video feature also that we just published on Monday with CBS Sports on the YouTube page. Be sure to give that a look as well. To me, although this is not A to A, like, Clayton, Jalen Brunson, that kind of stuff, I do think that his size, physicality, the way he plays, good enough defender, shooting is undeniable. It's just it was time and time again too. Now, don't get me wrong, like with the athletes and size and the way the NBA game is played, like he's going to have to translate that consistently to validate being taken in, say, the top 20, which I don't know if he'll go. I would put him there. I have him top 20 grade overall. But the fit here for Orlando is awesome, and I think that they would probably be thrilled if he fell to him. And I guess it's realistic that they could. But yeah, I'm once we got to our mock draft process and I was looking through, I was like, Clayton's still there. Like, there's just no other player that I want to put above him in this spot. And I do genuinely believe that he will go into the league, not be productive right away, but grow into a solid player. I think his age is working against him a little bit, fair or not, but we will circle back to this draft 4, 5, 6 years down the road, and we will say, look at that, Walter Clayton Jr. He really was one of the 10 best players in this class, but was never even remotely in the conversation to go there. I think that's his destiny, but ultimately his reality on Wednesday night will be somewhere in the 20s, I think.
KB, that takes us to the Nets at number 26.
I will select Hugo Gonzalez from Spain. He is a physical wing, really good measurables, international prospect, someone who is a developing shooter. I think there's a range on draft night for him where he could go, somewhere in the 20s. At 26, this seems to make a reasonable sense. Again, I've talked about Brooklyn before, but they do have 4 first-round picks. This is a franchise that is completely resetting, essentially. And Gonzalez is a young wing who, I think, going back to your point about Clayton, someone who is going to develop, I don't think he's going to be ready to contribute right away in the NBA's. And you get to this area in the draft in the 20s, you're not really expecting that. But in a few years, I think you could see a player like Gonzalez eventually develop into something for your franchise. And at 26 in the draft, that's kind of all you can hope for, I think, in this range. So that's who I'm going to select here.
So I got the Nets picking again at number 27. I have them selecting Maxim Reno, the 4-year player out of Stanford. He's an international prospect, I guess, technically, born in Paris. But did spend 4 years playing college basketball. And everybody says this is the way they want their 4-year career to go. Maybe not at Stanford playing in the ACC, losing a lot, but like beyond that, like just get better every year. I want to be a little bit better every year than I was the year prior. And he really was that. Year 1 at Stanford, he only plays like 12 minutes a game. By his 4th year at Stanford, he's averaging 20 points per game. So, legitimate 7-footer who shot for his career around 35% from 3. So he's just your modern stretch the floor big. I mean, there's obvious concerns like, not every guy who can shoot at that size is a impactful NBA player because sometimes you just can't keep them on the court because they can't do the other things that they need to do to stay on the court. As always, we'll see. But if you're in the market for bigs with size who can stretch the floor and allow you to play 5 out, this is the type of player that theoretically lets you do that.
I've got the next pick. And by the way, I think you got to believe the Nets will trade out of one of those two, but we'll see. Reno was a stat monster. I'm interested to see where he goes. And if he's one of those guys where you're watching the playoffs 3 years from now and he's like getting real minutes and you're like, it really did translate. There he is. Like he's on the floor in the 3rd quarter of a game that matters in like the Eastern Conference semis or something like that. I've got the 20th pick with the Celtics and I have him taking Noah Penda out of France. Feels like his floor is right around here. I don't think he falls to the 2nd round. He's like a power wing, good with the ball in his hands, can play off of it, solid enough 3-point shooter, and we'll take some time to adjust and grow, and we'll see what his track is. Celtics are in an interesting spot. Oklahoma City, a team we've talked about, they win the title, and they're sitting here with first-round picks. That's obviously a great job by Presti. The Celtics, meanwhile, won't have Tatum when they come back next season because he's going to be repairing that Achilles injury, and who they pick here and how much a player can really step in and be an impactful guy. I'll be intrigued to see who it's going to be. I picked Penda here. He was my highest ranked prospect when it came back around to us. KB, you're next with the Suns, but before that, any quick thoughts or scouting report on Penda here? He's probably going to be the last guy or one of the last guys in a run this year in the first round where we're looking at 5, 6, maybe 7 guys with international backgrounds that wind up getting selected.
Yeah, and a lot of guys from France who are going to end up being selected somewhere in this range. Just a power wing, as you mentioned, elite feel and skill. Just watching him, he's a kind of like true defensive playmaker, someone who like is always in passing lanes and blocking shots and deflecting passes and producing at a high level professionally in France, which I think is like a good indicator for future success. Not always, but he's playing in the LNB Pro A, which again produced Victor Wembanyama, produced Bilal Coulibaly, and producing at a high level at just 20 years old. I think there's a lot to like here. The Celtics in an interesting and maybe unique position to, take a flyer on someone like a Pinda and maybe stash him for a year, draft him, develop him, be whatever it is, and end up, potentially coming back to be a useful piece for a team that, when healthy, can contend for an NBA championship.
That puts us at where we at
29.
29
Maybe
now.
you're up.
29.
Phoenix
Yes.
Suns.
For the Phoenix Suns, I will select Yannick Conan Niederhauser from Penn State. This is a kind of wild card swing. Niederhauser was not on my radar as a first round pick as recently as like 40 days ago, probably. But
This
really,
is even something, KB, where our listeners are our pod are like, who is this dude? It's just serious. Like, it's just Penn State wasn't that good, but anyway, he has developed into a legit prospect. But continue.
Yeah, no, he produced at a high level, kind of in obscurity last season at Penn State, but really kind of made a splash at the draft combine, turned heads in a big way, and I didn't think he really had a decision to make where everyone kind of expected he would come back to school, but he played so well at the NBA draft combine. His measurables were so good, and he just looked like he belonged on the floor during the scrimmage section of the combine that he just decided to stay in the draft. And now might be a first round pick. He's got really good size, someone who I think can be a potential starting caliber center at the NBA, and getting any type of starter at number 29 in the draft would be like just a major, major hit. So I think for the Phoenix Suns, who obviously are in a bit of a rebuild here after trading Kevin Durant, that would be a huge boost. They obviously in an interesting spot where the Suns, they have Devin Booker already. They just traded for Jalen Green. Kevin Durant is moving out. So a lot of moving pieces there in Phoenix.
He played 3 years of college basketball. During each of those seasons, we do at least 3 Eye on College Basketball podcasts per week.
You think this guy's got no shot?
Oh, no. I don't think that at all.
I'm kidding.
I just mean that.
I know. We never.
I always love it.
I love this. His name was never mentioned.
Never been said
until this month.
That's until yes. And for my purposes, until 2 minutes ago. Yeah. if his name's ever been said before, I wouldn't listen. Okay. So I just like it when there's a rare possible first round draft pick that operated completely off of the national radar through 3 years of college. And this is an example of that. And perhaps, the final pick in this mock draft is an example that not quite as dramatically, but I've got the Clippers selecting with the 30th pick, Rasheer Fleming out of St. Joseph's. He's a 6'9" forward, 7'5" wingspan, 230 pounds. So looks the right way. 15 points, 9 rebounds per game, and shot 39% from 3 on 4.5 attempts per game. So on so many of these prospects, we're like, and here's something he can't do, and here's something he can't do, and here's something that has to improve. And a lot of time it's like the body's got to improve, got to get stronger, got to improve the shot. Well, here's a guy with a great body who's a reliable three-point shooter. There are questions about his feel for the game and overall skill set, but I just believe in people like this. 6'9", great body who can shoot. I've seen some comparisons to Bobby Portis. And if you could get a Bobby Portis with the 30th pick in the draft, you'd be very happy with that.
Yeah.
Hop in there, KB, then I'll close it with a thought.
No, I think that's right. Like there's a lot to like here with Rasheer Fleming, someone who didn't necessarily dominate at St. Joseph's, but he was in a role at St. Joseph's like later in his career where I don't think he's ever going to be asked to be like the number 1 or the number 2 option in the NBA like he was in college. So I think he is a perfect prospect of like primed for his role at the NBA, which is he's going to use his size to be a defensive menace. He's going to be asked to step out and make corner threes. He's going to try and, not do too much, essentially. Like, he's not going to be asked to do any creation on offense. He's not going to do any of the things that he was doing at St. Joseph's. And I think he would be a star in his role, which is, is essentially what you're looking for someone late in the first round.
Yeah, he was – I love stories like this. He and Niederhauser, who, by the way, sounds like one of the nicknames from Rookie of the Year. God-knows-er, Niederhauser. You really can come from anywhere. Fleming, going into last season when St. Joe's was thought to be like a good chance at breaking through in the A-10 and making the NCAA tournament, and then that didn't happen. But a big reason why was two reasons. It was Eric Reynolds and Xavier Brown. And those guys wound up being pretty solid, and they were the two leading scorers for St. Joe's last season. Then Fleming was third, led the team in rebounding, led the team in he was second on the team in blocks. But a player's path to getting drafted, or at least having a shot at the NBA, be it if you're the 30th projected pick or the 21st, or hell, even if you're like sitting in that 45 to 54 range, they will find you. Like, look at Cedric Coward. He should not have ever been found. They will find you. And every year, I don't know for sure Fleming will stick. I don't know if he'll play more than 10 games ever in the NBA, or if he's looking down the barrel of a 12-year awesome career. But I think it's a good reminder to players right now who are getting ready to play their next season of college basketball, be it their second, third, or fourth season, or whatever it is, and they know they're not going to be the number one option. They know they're not going to be the number two option. Heck, Cedric Coward was the number 6 option when he first played in Division I. If you walk your path and abide by the things that you think are going to get you there, and you're really honest with yourself, and you trust your coach, and you get the right advisors and people around you, like, you can break through. Very few people that are going to watch the draft on Wednesday night have any idea who Rasheer Fleming is. And I don't know if he'll get taken Wednesday or in the second round of Thursday, but it's a cool story regardless that he has played and worked his ass off to get in this spot overall, regardless of where he eventually winds up and being taken.
It is one of the big misnomers with dreaming about the NBA that you need to go to Duke or Kentucky or Kansas. Obviously, those are great places to go, and they produce a lot of NBA players. But more than anything, they recruit NBA players and then pass them on to the NBA. To your point, I'm not exaggerating. This is not hyperbole. If you play Division I men's basketball, and really not even that, but let's just draw the line at Division I men's basketball, it does not matter where you play. If you're a legitimate NBA prospect, they will find you. It does not matter where you play. Damian Lillard got found at Weber State, and that wasn't
the tournament.
Yeah. Ja Morant, before he became what he became, was a third leading scorer on an OVC team, and he was going by Demetrius. He was Demetrius Morant, third leading scorer on an OVC team, and they found him there. And then the next season's when he just went crazy and then became the second pick in the draft. But he was on NBA radars after being the third leading scorer at an OVC school because they saw stuff that they liked. You're going to see a lot of misses in this draft and every draft, but the advanced scouting has never been better throughout the world. And if I had a son who was a basketball prospect, this is something that I would be emphasizing. Like, hey, man, it's up to you. Go wherever you want to go. But if you think you need to go to a certain type of place to have a real shot at the NBA, that is wrong. You can go anywhere. And if you're an NBA player, the NBA will find you.
No doubt. Our highest ranked players on our CBS Sports consensus big board, by the way, here are the top 4 in order. Ryan Kalkbrenner out of Creighton is our 27th player. Drake Powell out of Carolina, an intriguing player to follow on draft night, be it Wednesday and or Thursday. He's 28. Will Riley out of Illinois, who I thought we'd be higher on consensus-wise, but that's actually more in line with where I have him, so other folks obviously agreed. He's 32, and then Cam Jones is 34, and he's the one player – we can wrap on this and we can get out of here. By the way, GP, we went 90 minutes. Cam Jones is one player who, if you told me he wound up going like 26, 27, 28, yeah, it wouldn't stun me. I'm picking up on a little bit like, is he kind of sneakily – are there a couple of teams that are like really coveting him more than that has been represented, be it in mocks or just general coverage? He's the guy I'd keep an eye on. And then the other thing I'll tag this with, and you guys can close with whatever thoughts you want, however you want to go with it. Janai Broome is, we talked about Clayton, we talked about Flagg. Janai Broome was the second best player in the sport last season. He doesn't seem to be having the momentum to go in the first round, but I do expect him to go anywhere from, say, 35 to 43 overall. He will covet some suitors. His translation to the NBA is obviously a big question there, so we'll wait and see on that. But Cam Jones is the one guy who is like kind of universally been projected to the second round that if he said could really pop in and sneak on Wednesday, I'd put my money on him.
The 3-point percentage was not as good in his last year at Marquette, but he was playing a totally different role, and I think probably helped himself in that role, even if the 3-point numbers weren't great, because we know he can shoot. He's got a large sample size of shooting, and what we learned in that last year at Marquette is he can play on the ball. So when you talk about a guy like Jace Richardson as a combo guard on the smaller side, Cam Jones is average sized for an off-ball shooting guard, but for a combo guard, he's pretty good size. And if the shooting looks more like the first years at Marquette as opposed to the last year at Marquette, you got something interesting there, like a combo guard with size who can, really knock down shots. I think he'll play it wherever he's picked. I think he'll play in the NBA.
I think he's got a good shot as well. KB, close us out on this. Second round guy that you're really high on, higher than most. You would take him the first round. You got a first round grade that we didn't take here tonight. Who is it?
Drake Powell from
Really?
North Carolina. Yeah, I have him as the number 22 player on my board. I'm surprised that he didn't get mocked and picked here, but like the late 20s or even like mid 20s to late 20s and early 30s is really strong in this draft. Like we didn't talk Drake Powell, we didn't talk Cam Jones, Adu Thiero, Ryan Kalkbrenner, Will Riley. Like all of those guys could end up being first round picks, and it wouldn't be totally surprising. Like there is a lot of strength in the 20s and 30s in this draft. Like there's a surprising amount of depth, and man, if there's a team that ends up getting Ryan Kalkbrenner at like 33, like how excited would you be on draft night? Like that is tremendous value. Someone who's produced at a high level, like was a 4-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year. There's I think there's going to be some smart teams who end up trying to trade up into the early portions of the second round just because of the value proposition that is probably awaiting there.
And just to expand on that point, like there's so many mock drafts out there, and readers are consuming perhaps not all of them, but lots of them. So you see a guy who is like in the 20s in every mock draft you've seen, and you're like, well, I guess he's got to go in the 20s. But every year this happens to somebody. He's mocked in the 20s and everybody, and then he's 37th. Mm-hmm. And so I haven't put down pen to paper and actually done the research on it, but I think something close to this is probably true. If you are consensus mocked in the top 5, you're probably going to go in the top 10. If you're consensus mocked in the top 10, you're probably at worst going to go somewhere in the top 20. Once you get to the 20s, buddy, like you go
so many different.
You could go 22 or 37,
yes.
and there ain't much difference. Yep. There is a major difference between, say, 2 and 17, but there ain't much difference between 22 and 37.
With some people would tell you like 25 to 50, it really is not that much difference, particularly in the modern NBA.
By the way, same thing with recruiting rankings. There is a massive difference between the number 1 ranked high school player and the 20th ranked high school player in most years, but there's almost no difference between the 60th and the 90th.
Yep. Would agree. That's a show. Look at us, more than 90 minutes in on a mock draft. GP looking strong. Better call Saul, by the way. Yeah, you look strong, jaw. KB. It's a pleasure doing it with you guys. I'm gonna shut up and put the mic up. We'll talk to you again on Wednesday night during the draft.
Don't forget, we'll be CBS Sports HQ and live on YouTube for the draft. I believe starting with, but I should have checked the start time.
I think it's 7, GP. I think it's 7.
Start at 7 p.m. We'll go to the first round that's done. I'll be in studio in Stamford, Connecticut. And then as soon as we're done with that, so let's say 10, 15 minutes, maybe 20, after the first round of the draft is complete. You know how it is in Stamford. I got to make sure they set all my stuff up. You know what? Oh,
where are my green M&Ms? Damn it. You know I can't podcast without my green M&Ms.
Well, we'll also have to do a bunch of VODs after the draft. It's going to be a minute, all right? Maybe 25. But eventually, it'll be my face in Norlander's phase, and we'll recap the first round of the 2025 NBA draft. So join us on Wednesday night. And with that, let's get out of here. Shouts to Devin Downey, Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Terry Teagle. He's a legend. Huck Larnell. Thank you guys once again for watching, listening to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere. Subscribe to podcasts, Apple, Spotify. There's more of us than there are of them. That should be reflected in the comments. So please do that. We'll talk to you again on Wednesday night. Till then, take care.